Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video. So back in September, I made a prediction video regarding old school RuneScape on mobile and how big an effect it would actually have on the player count and just the general health of the game. Well, today I wanted to look back on that prediction and see where we're at. Well, we're almost 6 months later now. We're going to be looking at the current player counts and how much they have grown since the mobile release. I'm also going to look at other social websites related to RuneScape like Reddit, YouTubers. Jagex also published their revenue from 2018, so we can have a look at that. That's also very telling. And just generally, I want to look at the overall impact that mobile has had on old school RuneScape. I hope you enjoy, and let's get started.
Do you think mobile is going to have a big impact on old school RuneScape? Mobile for old school RuneScape has been in development for quite a while now. It's like a year delayed almost, but is it going to be worth it for the game? Everyone knows about RuneScape, so if they see it in the App Store, I think a lot of people will at least give it a try, which will give the game an initial surge of a ton of players, would be my prediction. So now what does mobile have going against it? Well, I think one of the largest and primary things going against it right now is that new player burnout. I think is going to be very rapid and extensive. As I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of new players are going to come to the game, but will they stick around?
Okay, so let's start off with easily the most related metric for measuring how popular a game is, and that is the average player count. So we've gone to a website called Misplaced Items. I'll leave a link in the description. It's pretty fun to have a look at. It has pretty much up-to-date statistics for player counts for both game modes, for OSRS as well as RuneScape. We can change it from the average of the day or the peak of the day. For doing the comparison, I'm just going to be using the peak. So having a look at the last couple of days, the peak for old school RuneScape is 90,000, 96,000, 100,000 almost. Sundays is always the most popular day. We had 117,000 people playing that day. 106,000, 98,000, so looking pretty healthy. So now let's go have a look at the historical player counts for OSRS. So the initial player count when the game was released was 70,000, so we are well above that now. And it's pretty easy to tell based on this when mobile was released, right here. So before it was released, we were looking at kind of peak player counts of around 70,000, 80,000 maximum. We have been on an upward trend for years now. However, after the release of mobile, we went from around 70,000 to 80,000 a day all the way up to 140,000 to 150,000. I think the all-time peak player count was around 150,000, and that was just a couple weeks after the release. So there has been a pretty substantial drop off, but it has been around 6 months now, so I kind of expect that to slow down a bit. We still are above the initial player count. We're still getting between like 100,000 and 120,000 every day. However, I do think my original prediction that, we would see a pretty substantial drop-off is unfortunately true. Now, that is not to say that OSRS Mobile was not a huge success. I think it was. The game was definitely exposed to tens of thousands of new players. I'm sure that some of them are sticking around, and overall, I think it really just had a very positive effect on the game. However, just based on these numbers, it does seem that, just not a lot of them stuck around. As I mentioned in my previous video in September, RuneScape is just generally a very grindy game, which does not really coincide with how most people view mobile games. Most mobile games require very little attention, and while they may take a while to progress, that does not require a lot of your own time. They're either like idle games, small indie games, or just really simple arcadey style games. RuneScape Mobile is in some ways one of the first of its kind, incorporating a combination of desktop play and mobile play. It's definitely not the first game, but it's pretty unique as far as mobile games go. And for that reason, I think that RuneScape Mobile is mostly appealing to existing players. So I think based on these numbers, maybe we got around 5 to 10% new players, but most of the rest of that I would imagine is existing players or people who had played the game 10 years ago and decided to rekindle their love for RuneScape. So as I mentioned in yesterday's video, Jagex did publish their revenue from 2018, so that's from January 1st to December 31st of 2018. So mobile had been released for only 2 months of that year. However, that was 2 of the most popular months for RuneScape in recent history, at least since old school RuneScape has been released. Jagex generated 92.8 million pounds in revenue, which was a growth of 9.3%, and 46.8 million of that was in profit, which was only a growth of 3.8%. My prediction is that had a lot to do with the development costs of RuneScape Mobile. In the article, they even stated that part of the success was driven by the launch of Old School RuneScape on mobile last year, which has been installed more than 5 million times across iOS and Android. 5 million installs is pretty damn impressive. It's nice to have a more specific number because I was looking for that information, and on the App Store it just says more than 1 million, which there are a lot of numbers more than 1 million. Why can't you just specify a bit more? So they're claiming 5 million downloads across iOS and Android. I'd be really interested to see how many new members came from mobile, how many new accounts were made. Also, in yesterday's video, I mentioned that Jagex launched a third-party publishing arm called Jagex Partners. I did talk about that in yesterday's video, so I won't mention it too much, but I think that's also where a lot of the revenue maybe went for this year. Pretty much they're just looking to break into other game markets. So for Jagex Partners, they hired 100 people and increased the investment in research and development by 69%. So it looks like they are really trying to ride this wave of success into other aspects of gaming. A lot of money is going into development. So I think clearly OSRS Mobile was an excellent decision from a financial standpoint. I would like to know how much of this 9.3% of growth was just due to November and December. And it'll be really interesting to see how that's reflected in the entirety of 2019. Because that's a much longer time frame with generally much higher player counts. Because looking at this, the player counts did continue to be pretty high even in January and February. We only really saw the big drop off in March, and it's kind of been going downhill from there, unfortunately. But there's 2 huge months in January and February too, so I would expect a pretty good year for 2019 as well. And clearly, because they hired like 100 new people and they're trying to make another Fortnite game. Another huge area of success for RuneScape Mobile is we actually won a BFTA award. A month ago we voted, and OSRS Mobile actually won that year. Hang on, is this the guy from Lost? What the hell is it? Yeah, no, that totally is. That's the guy who was the scientist from Lost. Why is he hosting it? But it does seem like OSRS Mobile was genuinely appreciated and well reviewed by most players and most critics. The gameplay is really solid, and I think that transferred over to mobile in a very good way. Overall, OSRS Mobile was an excellent port of the game. I still use it pretty much daily to do farm runs, play a little bit. It's honestly excellent. It honestly is just excellent. It runs perfectly. The controls are really good considering how complicated RuneScape is for a mobile game. So regardless of what the player counts are looking like, I think the devs did an excellent job porting the game. And the last area I wanted to look at is, well, social media influence. I think that is a pretty big factor when it comes to looking at a game's health as well as popularity. Looking at websites like Reddit, YouTube, and just generally seeing how many content creators there are and what the population is looking like on third-party websites, which I think is really a good indicator. Okay, first up here, let's have a look at Reddit. On the day that RuneScape Mobile was released, the player counts were 259,000, and 6 months later, let's have a look, we're at 351,000. So the 2007 Reddit has grown by around 100,000 users, which is substantially higher than its historical growth. 100,000 in 6 months is huge. Pretty easy to see that a lot of new players went to Reddit, subbed to the 2007 Reddit just because of RuneScape Mobile. OSRS has always had a pretty strong presence on Reddit, but that has been augmented substantially. And the more popular your Reddit is, the higher chances it has of getting into RL, which exposes the game to a ton of users who may never even play the game. It's just showing up in their feed. A good illustration of this is the crab meme, which is now leaked into a lot of other subreddits as well as other social media websites. I think this is partly due to how popular the 2007 Reddit has become because of OSRS Mobile. Now, another pretty obvious correlation between the two is, well, my own viewer count. Let's have a look. So here's when I got back from my trip, August, and here's when I started producing quite a few videos a day. But here is when mobile was released. Pretty much right here, I went from like 800,000 up to a peak of 1.8 million views in a month, which is by far the most I've ever gotten, and now it's kind of dropping off again. Sad. But you can see this graph here is pretty similar to this bit here if we shrunk it down a bit. And I think there is probably a strong correlation to be made. Now YouTube is way too chaotic to make any direct comparisons. No one really knows what's going on. This is just my guess. This could easily be wrong. But I think the general increase and decrease looks pretty similar if we compare it to the RuneScape player counts. And I think other YouTubers have experienced a pretty similar trend. So in the end, old school RuneScape Mobile I think had a huge positive effect on the game. However, a lot of those players probably aren't sticking around long term, and that honestly is okay. I think from what most people expected of mobile, it far exceeded everyone's expectations. It is easily a huge success from a technical standpoint. A really awesome port, the devs did an awesome job. The player counts are still up, and I think we still will probably have an increased player count over what we normally would have had without mobile. I think it really helps add to the brand, so in the future, having it on mobile is just a really good thing to have. Your existing player base has been extremely happy with the product and probably is playing more, spending more money. So overall, mobile was a huge success. Player count wise, I think not as much as some people hoped, but I think that really comes down to just the type of game it is. People's attention spans really aren't that long, especially when you're coming into it from directly a mobile game. It's pretty hard to get invested that quickly on your phone. Generally, you're out doing things. It's hard to focus that intently on the game. And I think that's okay, not really unexpected, and that's pretty much where we're at. Anyway guys, that is it for the video. What do you guys think about the future of mobile, player counts, stuff like that? Let me know down below. If you did enjoy, definitely leave the video a like, I would appreciate it, and I will see you next time.